That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, we've had an hour and a half conversation already, but we're having to re-record. That's part of it. 'Tis life. I was very frustrated earlier, but I think us waiting a little while, getting away from it for a little bit, if I'd immediately jumped on, I would have cussed everybody at AT&T, StreamYard. I would have Auburn fans. I would have been blaming everybody. So glad we gave it a couple of hours to relax a little bit. But we are here to talk not only about Alabama's upcoming game against Georgia a little bit. We're here to react to Alabama's 27-20 victory over Auburn. But first, I kind of want to talk about the college football playoffs a little bit, because there was a lot of information that we got over the weekend. Alabama got a good, tough victory over Auburn, but you also got Notre Dame blowing out Stanford. You obviously got Texas Tech blowing out West Virginia. And so just based off of what happened this weekend and how people were talking about the college football playoffs, what are your thoughts on Alabama's chances of obviously getting in?
Well, it all hinges on two games. Clearly, Alabama, Georgia, and also Texas Tech, BYU is going to play a factor here. The only take on this that gets me all riled up, that's just wrong, is the fans that are so ultra confident about Alabama now being in the playoff that they don't want to even entertain the thought. They're just, hey, there's a 100% chance Alabama's in. I agree that most likely Alabama's in, no matter what happens against Georgia. Most likely that's true. But there is this math problem, and that is that if Alabama remains 10th in the rankings, and we'll know Tuesday night, if Alabama remains 10th, that means you're the last team in, the very last team in. If BYU upsets Texas Tech Saturday morning in the lead into the Alabama-Georgia game, if Texas Tech loses to BYU now gets an automatic spot. So BYU is in, and someone has to come out. And Alabama is the last team in for right now, assuming that holds Tuesday night. If you're the last team in and someone has to come out, it's not crazy to be nervous about what the committee is going to do. And so if you're an Alabama fan, it's this simple. Win the game. Win Saturday, and this is all just wasted cyberspace, even discussing it. Just win Saturday, you're in. If you do lose, you need to hope that in the game prior, Texas Tech won. If Texas Tech wins, I don't care if Alabama loses to Georgia. I think Alabama's in. I don't think Alabama would be leapfrogged by Miami, Vanderbilt, Texas, even with a loss to Georgia. I don't believe that for a single second that would happen, because just the fallout would be just so dramatic from Greg Sankey and what the SEC might do if that ever happened. But no, I do think there is one legitimate path or one legitimate set of facts that would make me nervous, and that's Alabama losing to Georgia, especially if they lose substantially by a couple scores or more, and BYU upsets Texas Tech, thus earning an automatic bid for BYU. I'll be nervous Sunday morning, dude. You're going to have to hold my hand through that.
Yeah, that is where things get really dicey. Now, you did talk earlier, the first time we recorded this, and you mentioned the fact that Texas Tech and BYU are going to be playing before Alabama and Georgia. That is great information. And as you said, that's, at least if you're Alabama, exactly what you need to do in the SEC championship. Now, granted, that doesn't mean you take the foot off the gas if BYU gets beat by Texas Tech and you say, oh, we're in no matter what. Let's not worry about it. That's not the approach you want. Alabama's approach should be the same regardless. But from a fan's perspective, it'll be good to know, okay, Alabama's probably pretty safe in this game, regardless of what happens, assuming that there isn't some sort of massive blowout. Now, because that will just change everything, or could change everything. But as long as they keep it respectable, they're probably in no matter what. But it's just better. Go ahead, go get your victory. I say that like it's going to be easy, but it's not. But if you win, you probably get the first round bye. I think from a health standpoint, that would definitely benefit Alabama. But it's like the reason that you say that, if you pull Alabama out because you're putting BYU and two conference champions in, then that is a result of just people having to come in. So you got to bump somebody out. So it has nothing to do with the SEC championship and the result of that. Your argument or your point is that Miami, if BYU doesn't beat Texas Tech and Miami doesn't play for a conference championship, then there is no automatic qualifier for Miami. So in that instance, you would be dropping Alabama out of the top 10 or the top 12 in order to bring Miami up, simply because Alabama lost the SEC championship game. So in that instance, that's why you say that you don't think that's happening. Now, the reason that BYU and Texas Tech is such a dangerous conversation is if BYU beats Texas Tech, the argument a lot of people say, we'll just drop Texas Tech out, was we talked about earlier, that would be dropping a conference championship participant. They're dropping them for losing their conference championship. Now, we all want to make an argument that the SEC and Big Ten is different. I do think there's an argument to be made there, but based off of what they did with the ACC last year and the fact they didn't drop out SMU, I would assume that they're going to treat the Big 12 the same way. So in that instance, both Texas Tech and BYU would both be in. That's why that 10 spot becomes all the more vulnerable, and that's where the conversation needs to be had. So yes, if you are Alabama, you need to be pulling hard for Texas Tech, and you need to be pulling hard for Alabama. And at least that if Texas Tech gets beat in that Big 12 championship on Saturday, now more than likely you need to beat Georgia in the SEC championship. So it is now playoffs, win or go home pretty much. That is pretty good information to know. We did talk about Vanderbilt earlier, and just kind of, it's unfortunate because when you look at their schedule and they've beat some good teams. They just dominated Tennessee on Saturday. They lost two close road games, both to Texas and Alabama. The one to Texas was an overtime loss. It was a 3-point loss. The one to Alabama, yes, it looks lopsided on paper, and to an extent it was. But at the same time, there was a late score by Alabama that really pulled that away and made it a 30-14 victory, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds right.
So otherwise, it would have been fewer than 10 points. It's unfortunate that that's how that worked out. But at the same time, there's only 12 spots. There's just not enough room for them.
Yeah, I doubt it makes Vanderbilt feel any better to hear this, but they're a playoff team. They deserve a playoff spot. They earned their way into the playoff, in my opinion, but there's not enough spots. There's a difference between being playoff worthy and being in the playoff. I think Vanderbilt's playoff worthy. Heck, I'd say the same thing about Texas. That's a little more controversial because it's a 3-loss team, but if this really is about the 12 best teams in college football, I'm not so sure Texas doesn't belong in that ranking of the 12 best teams. Maybe, but I just know this: there's not enough spots to include Vanderbilt, and not enough spots to include Texas. Playoff worthy, yes. Do they have a spot to get in? No. The dance card is full. The dance card's full with teams ahead. Vanderbilt shouldn't be ahead of Alabama. 3-loss Texas shouldn't be ahead of Alabama. And again, Alabama's the last team in, because 11 and 12 are going to be automatic qualifiers. The two conference winners, automatic qualifiers from the two lowest ranked conference champions that are in the thing, they're going to be in spots 11 and 12. So if Alabama's 10, Texas and Vandy just don't deserve it over Alabama, nor does Miami, nor does BYU. Of course, BYU can earn their way in with the win over Texas Tech. But gosh, I hate that for Vanderbilt especially. Who would have ever thought you could say Vanderbilt and playoff worthy in the same sentence? But they are, and I just hate it for them that they don't get to experience the playoff. It's not fair, but it's just what we have right now.
And I do think that had they not been Vanderbilt, they would probably be viewed differently right now with the same resume. And it's unfortunate
that they don't have too many great wins, though. I mean,
agreed.
One of these SEC teams, like Texas A&M, by the way, Texas is the best SEC team Texas A&M played all year, and they lost. I think Vanderbilt, what is Vanderbilt's best win? Tennessee. I think their win over Tennessee this weekend is their best win, right? I mean, it's certainly not Virginia Tech. It's not Auburn.
Missouri, probably.
Missouri, who spent some of the season ranked. South Carolina. I mean, Kentucky. These are pretty good wins, but nothing to really hang their hat on other than Tennessee, which may have been their most impressive performance. This is what y'all can do for all you AP voters and playoff committee members that listen to this show, and thank you for listening. You should be listening to this show. This is what you can do. You know what you can do? And I'll whisper this. I don't like the kid either. I don't like him. I really don't. But you can vote for Diego Pavi to win the Heisman to make up for Vanderbilt not being in the playoff, because you know what? It's not a wasted vote. There's not a wasted vote. I'm serious when I say I don't care for him. Anybody whose idol is Johnny Manziel, I'm automatically gonna go. I'm not sure I'm on board with this whole thing. But the kid, the award goes to most outstanding player in college football. Mendoza might win it. I like Mendoza. I think he's fine if he wins it, and it's fine if he's even the first pick in the draft, frankly. But put Mendoza at Vanderbilt. I mean, put Mendoza at Vanderbilt and put Pavi at Indiana. I would argue that Indiana would be in the same place and Vanderbilt would not be. I think Pavia raises the program and raises the level of everything around him. And I just think Pavia has done more for his team than Mendoza has done for his. And that's how you can make up Vanderbilt getting hosed out of this playoff spot is voting for Diego Pavia to win the Heisman.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now, but just to make sure I'm not wrong on this. Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, there's not a whole lot of difference between Notre Dame's schedule and Vanderbilt's as far as what they've accomplished, who they've beat, who they've lost to. Granted, Texas A&M playoff team, Miami right there on the cusp, and that's a total of 4 points, a 4-point, deficit there as far as losses are concerned. They beat USC. USC is really not that great to me. Pitt obviously got completely smoked this past weekend by Miami, so they're not going to be in the top 25. So there's actually a lot of similarities between Vanderbilt and Notre Dame. And granted, there's 4 spots between them, so it's not like it's substantial or huge. But I still think right now, Alabama should be ahead of Notre Dame. Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame, and the fact they're not is a kind of a travesty. But at the same time, it is what it is. I did say earlier, and I'll reiterate it here because I do find it so funny. The examples I used: Alabama plays LSU back in 2011, and a rematch for the national title, and you had this perfect example of why there needed to be some expansion to 4. And then, you start carrying on and there's talk of 12-team playoff, and that's kind of the direction that it's heading. And then there's this perfect example. Really, you could make the argument for Georgia against Alabama. Like, they went to the SEC championship, they lost, and they dropped out of the college football playoffs as a result, even though same number of losses. Now, Alabama had the head-to-head, so it made sense. But you have that example. You have a Power 5 conference champion in the ACC, Florida State. They get left out of a 14 playoff, and it is this perfect example of why 12 makes sense. Hey, let's expand it to 12, where there never has to be another Georgia in that situation or another Florida State. We're going to take care of everybody here, anybody that deserves it. Now we're sitting here talking about Miami should be getting in, Vanderbilt should get in. I think I think there is an argument. Now, we said earlier, last year with Ole Miss, South Carolina, Alabama, no 3-loss team in the regular season should get into the college football playoffs based off of the precedent that they set last year. Texas, they are in that same conversation now. It's kind of like they deserved it, or they deserve it as much as those 3 teams last year. And yet none of those 3 teams got in. Texas is not getting in here, but they should, have a chance at a national championship. But there's only 12 spots. And yet we have this perfect example with Texas and Vanderbilt and Miami, maybe even a Utah if you want to go that direction. BYU's complaining that unless they beat Texas Tech, they're on the outside looking in. That's not right. They only have 1 loss right now. If you go to 16, all of these teams get taken care of. Oh, it would be the perfect solution. Now we're good to go. We're ready to rock and roll. That's all we needed. Next thing you know, there will be the perfect example of a season where the team sitting at 17, 18, and 19 deserve to be in a 16-team playoff, but they don't have enough spots, and this is why 24 makes sense. We're heading in that direction. It's going to happen. It's unfortunate, but that it is college football at this point.
12 sounds right, Clint, but see, I mean, 12 sounds fine. Like, okay, you should be able to easily determine the national champion if you have 12 teams. But see, we don't have 12 teams because we certainly don't have the 12 best, because you have automatic qualifiers that are in this thing from outside the top 12 rankings. Virginia is likely to get in. They're not ranked in the top 12. We know Tulane's getting in. They're not. I mean, who's got a better chance to get in this playoff in advance, Tulane or Texas? We all know that's Texas. We all know that. But Tulane's going to be in. Now, I'm not sitting here arguing. I know why Tulane's in, and I know why they set up this format. I understand it. I'm not even 100% against it, but I'm just explaining why it's kind of harder to make a 12-team playoff than many might think because there's so many automatic qualifiers, and in some cases, automatic qualifiers that don't belong in a who are the best 12 teams discussion. And again, in this specific instance, Virginia and Tulane, both very likely to be in. Heck, you could have James Madison in this thing. You could have, if Duke beats Virginia, James Madison is likely to get in. North Texas could get in if they upset Tulane. None of those teams should be anywhere near a discussion of who are the best teams in college football in 2026, 2025. However, Texas, Vanderbilt, Miami, yeah, they've earned seats at the table over those teams, but that's just the system that we have.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting, if you had some sort of playing game, right? Maybe if you made Miami play instead of giving the G5 an automatic qualifier, you say, okay, you will get that kind of play-in game. If you want to go in, if you want to play with the big boys and get in the big boy playoff, beat a team like Miami, who's on the outside looking in right now in the current structure, but you're also giving them an opportunity to play a team they should beat and say, hey, why don't you check that box? You're not quite good enough to get in on your own merit based off of how the season's played out and who else is involved. But if you can go out there and you can beat a Tulane, you take their spot, the spot that was previously promised to them. I think if you had a couple of those, maybe a Vanderbilt doing that as well, that would probably help on some of that. There would still be an argument for other teams. There's always going to be an argument for other teams, at least for the most part. But, I don't think that getting into the big boy dance right out of the gate for a team like Tulane or James Madison or North Texas or Boise State, I just don't think that should be the case. Maybe they won't do something like that, but that would maybe be a solution to fix that problem and say, Miami, you just start the playoffs 1 week earlier than everybody else. I mean, that's just how it is. You weren't going to get in otherwise. So would you rather take that or would you rather watch, from the outside looking in? I'm sure they would take that opportunity, despite the fact that would add another football game. There's a lot of teams also that are, having to play extra games relative to everybody else because the top 4 seeds, they're getting the bye week.
Yeah. And the conference champions. I mean, a great conversation also have is this. If Alabama beats Georgia, will they be a top 4 seed and get a bye? I'm not crazy about those buys. Last year, all 4 teams that had a bye lost immediately. They had a bye 1 week and then they all 4 lost the next week. I'm not crazy about that bye, but this year, Alabama is so banged up on offense where the quarterback's banged up. You got 2 running backs out. I think, Ryan's been banged up a lot. Your tight end's out. Now Parker Brailsford's hurt at center. Alabama could probably use that bye. If they somehow, some way, find a way to beat a banged up Georgia team, gosh, that bye might be worth its weight in gold to Alabama this year. Now, if Alabama wins, do they get a top 4? I talked to some smart football guys today that know the playoff really well, people in the media industry that know the committee stuff really well. They're not convinced Alabama is a top 4 seed with a win over Georgia. I disagree. Who am I to disagree with them? But I am, just simply because of this. How is the SEC? How is someone from the SEC not a top 4 seed?
Yeah.
How are you? It's the best conference by far. How is it not? Particularly when it's the conference champion. And what are you going to do? Put one loss Texas A&M gets the bye when they weren't even in Atlanta playing that extra game against Georgia? No, you're not going to put the loser of, if Alabama beats Georgia, Georgia can't be a top 4 seed while Alabama's not. So that's the reason. I think if Texas Tech and Alabama win, what I suspect we'll see, Clint, is Ohio State, Indiana winner 1, Ohio State, Indiana loser 2, Big 12 champion Texas Tech 3, SEC champion Alabama 4. If Alabama, that's what I think it will be. Now I do realize Alabama's leapfrogging A&M and Oregon and Ole Miss and of course Georgia, Notre Dame and Oklahoma, who they lost to. I get that, but I just don't see how you can not have an SEC team among the top 4, and the only team that makes sense is your SEC champion.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And right with how else would it look? I mean, who else would you put in there? Would you put in Oregon? Like currently in the AP poll, they're ranked number 4. That's not how the college football playoff works. But if you continue to leave Ohio State and Indiana, the loser in there, you given 3 Big Ten teams first round buys, I highly doubt it. In 0 SEC, the SEC will absolutely lose its mind. So
when they sat at home, while Alabama did sort of the equivalent of beating Ohio State.
Right.
Oregon didn't even have the opportunity to do. Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with giving conference champions some level of deference here. That's and the Power 4 champions in particular. I think Alabama's in this weird spot, Clint, where I think hosting is out. I mean, I think they beat Georgia in their top 4 seed. That's what I believe. Or they lose to Georgia and they're number 10, which means you're on the road. Seems that middle tier that get to host the first round games. I don't see how Alabama ends up there unless they beat Georgia and they don't put Alabama in the top 4, which is possible. Yeah. That is possible. And again, I have a couple buddies that certainly know their stuff. That's what they believe will be the case. So I guess that is possible. But the way I see it, it's not.
Yeah, Alabama at that point would have beaten a playoff team in Georgia twice, and they would have beat another team that was competing for a college football playoff spot in Vanderbilt by 16 points. So, I mean, and they would at that point probably have Missouri. I think they're going to probably be back in the top 25. So they'd have another top 25 victory over Missouri. And then Tennessee is still a respected football team, despite the fact they're not going to be top 25. So you start going to that next wave, 26 to 35-ish. Tennessee's probably sitting somewhere in there. And so that would be another, what would be considered a respectable victory. I'm right there with you. I just don't see how they would end up working it out that way. It's going to be tough with the way that all this stuff's going to go. I mean, you talk about jumping, but I mean, it is what it is. Like the college football playoffs, and it's crazy. I mean, when's the last time a 7-5 football team played for a conference championship? And yet, the first season that we had where like, hey, it's the top 5 ranked conference champions, not Power 4, not Power 5. The second that happens, there's like this great. I would have been like, well, what does that matter? It's going to be the Power 4 every year. So like they're going to be and then all of a sudden now it's like, no. There actually might be a 2 group of 5 conference champions get in. Like that is bonkers to me and very odd timing. But I get, you know what? I'm going to take the tinfoil hat off and just let that ride.
I want Duke to win because this summer I predicted that the group of 5 team that would make the playoff is James Madison. So I do want Duke to win because that gives me some cred, Duke. So go, Duke.
Yeah, man, interesting. And then I actually think it's possible that Duke could win that game, to be honest with you. I don't think it's crazy. I'm not picking it, no, but
I think Virginia's going to win, but Duke has already played Virginia, and Virginia won the game. It wasn't a blowout, and and Duke is playing better football now than they were then. So I give Duke a chance. But yeah, I thought James Madison would be the group of 5. I knew they would be good. And see, what it was I was just more confident James Madison would win the Sun Belt than I was more confident than someone was going to just run roughshod over the much better American Athletic. I mean, James Madison's a good team in a really bad league. So I kind of said, well, James Madison will finish with no more than 1 loss. Plus, I thought they might beat Louisville. Their 1 loss is Louisville. By the way, they only lost by, I think, 10 or 14 to Louisville. I mean, they're not a bad football team. But, so I picked James Madison. So for that reason, I'll root for Duke.
You're over here saying this team's not that bad. Let's go ahead and slap them. Let's go ahead and slap them in the playoffs like that. And that's where we're at. Yeah.
They lost to Louisville by 2 touchdowns.
Of
course, Miami lost to Louisville, and people are saying Miami needs to be in.
Good point. Fair enough. It is just funny how we say that because, I mean, I think we all – anyways, we need to get to this Auburn game because that is – I mean, how Alabama performed in that game, if they could have really taken off when they were up 17-0 and just really took it to Auburn, I think that would have really made a statement. I don't care what their record is. Instead, they let them come back. They tied up 20-20. But then – the offense steps up when it needs to in those clutch moments and says, okay, we're going to drive the length of the field. We're going to score a touchdown. We're going to get out of here with a win, and we're going to take some risk doing it, including going forward on 4th down. A lot of people disagree with that call. I mean, obviously everybody's going to agree with it once it works, and it was a beautiful throw by Ty Simpson. But just, looking at the Auburn game, kind of how it played out, we're going to start with the offensive side of the football. What did you think about Ty Simpson, and what did you think about this offensive performance against Auburn on Saturday?
Yeah, well, they won the game, so huge. I don't think the rest of the country understands how big the game was. I think they see that 5-6 by Auburn's name and don't think much of this win because it was over a 5-6 football team. I think really only Alabama fans understand that this was a big game, similar to playing like again, might sound crazy to some people. I don't think the Auburn game last weekend is any lesser than the Georgia game this Saturday for the SEC championship in terms of the difficulty of winning. And I say, especially in terms of the difficulty of Alabama winning. Alabama winning at Auburn, with Auburn playing its absolute best, with DJ Durkin seemingly playing for a job, with the new quarterback, all the new coaches, all the excitement, Auburn playing its best football of the year, offensively and defensively. I was just a tough win for Alabama. So I'm really proud of them for finding a way on offense to win the game, because they did, as Clint pointed out, this game kind of played out in 3 acts. First act was Alabama destroying them. Alabama could run the football at will, and Auburn couldn't make a first down. So you're up 17-0. But then the second act, Alabama at its worst, the Alabama that we've seen that maybe that's not a playoff team, the one that gets outscored by Auburn 20-3, and in the middle of the game. Act 2, pretty disastrous for Alabama. But then Act 3 proves out what we said last week, which is that this season, 2025, has basically been a season in which a good Auburn team has found a way to lose in the fourth quarter, and a good Alabama team has found a way to win in the fourth quarter. That's how it's been all season. And what else do we say about this game? There's no surprises. There's no upsets, or very few. Usually the game plays out like you think it's going to play out, and the better team wins. It played out as if the 2025 year wrote the script itself. Alabama finding a way to win in the fourth quarter with a clutch offensive drive. Ty Simpson making the plays when he needs to, but not dominating the game. And Auburn playing really well and proving that they're much better than their record, but they'll find a way to lose late, and they did again. That's the way I look at it. Great performance by Alabama, great big win in a tough spot. But the game played out what amounts to, per the script you would kind of played out sort of obviously to me.
Here's what I don't like about 5-7 Auburn. And I use the record for a reason. People will say Alabama beat a now 5-7 Auburn team on Saturday. Whoop-de-doo. What did they do to get to 5-7? I mean, think about this. They played Oklahoma. They played Texas A&M. They played Georgia. They played Missouri. They played Vanderbilt. They played Alabama. Guys, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different teams, almost half of their schedule that was in the playoff conversation right now amongst the top 13 or 14 teams. And then that's another Missouri team who is ranked in the top 25. So half of their schedule was top 25 opponents currently, with 5 of the 6 being college football playoff contenders. And we're going to sit there and say, oh, you didn't beat all of them. The one thing that kept them from getting bowl eligible is losing a terrible football game to a Kentucky squad that was also that's also 5-7. Right. And so you look at that and you say, I mean, they didn't get the job done there. They could have been 6-6, but even had they got that win, would that have drastically changed the perception of Alabama going on the road and beating Auburn in Jordan-Hare Stadium against an arch rival that really wanted to beat them? No. It'd have been like, oh, you played close against a 6-6 football team. This is par for the course for Alabama. And it's like, not all 6-6 football teams, not all 5-7 football teams are made equal. This is where the depth of the SEC comes into play. It is that we look at it and we say, okay, how does the depth matter? You tell me how those Big Ten teams are getting to bowl eligibility, and then you explain to me how SEC teams are having to get to bowl eligibility. And that is, to me, the biggest difference. The quality of the SEC is not always reflected in the record. It's the same thing for South Carolina, which is even worse as far as their record is concerned. They did lose to Clemson. Clemson's not great this year. So I'm not saying they're a great football team. They're better than their record indicates. Auburn is better than that 5-7 record indicates. And that is what makes the SEC so tough relative to everybody else.
And how about this? And I know people are screaming into their YouTubes or their podcast while they're listening to this. They're screaming. But how about that? Alabama's 2 losses to 6-6 teams last year look better this year. Look who you lost to last year. Those supposed 6-6 teams: Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, playoff worthy teams. 1 year later, with basically a lot of the same kids. A lot of the same kids. So even that looks better now than it did at the time. A 6-6 SEC team is just dramatically different than 6-6 teams in other leagues. And your league schedule can be so, like, how crazy is it that Texas A&M, who's good, they're in the playoff, they deserve it. They're very good. They're one of the best teams in the country. The best SEC team they played all year was Texas, and they lost. It sounds hard to believe, but it's true. Their best SEC win, I think, is LSU. That's their best win in the league. Now, of course, outside the league, they beat Notre Dame, which is one of the best wins anybody's got this year. And that's why Notre Dame's in the playoff and so deserves it. But your league schedule and who you play outside the SEC. So how about this stat that one of my buddies came up with? I about accidentally named him, but he told me this. I wanted to give him credit. How about the fact that 9 teams that Notre Dame beat, 9 of their wins, they only have 10, 9 of their 10 wins are against teams ranked lower in ESPN's FPI than Florida State. Alabama's embarrassing loss to Florida State, 9 of Notre Dame's 10 wins are against teams ranked lower than FSU in the FPI. It infuriates you when you see Alabama behind Notre Dame Tuesday night, which you may very well see Alabama continuing to be behind Notre Dame. But every metric screams Alabama in that. But you could say the same thing about SEC games, which we're talking about here. That was not a 5-7, 6-6 team that Alabama beat, particularly when it's at their place. And hey, give Auburn all the credit in the world. I'm an Alabama fan. I don't like giving Auburn credit about anything, but I give them credit for this: how they consistently play their best against Alabama. It can be a 12-0 Auburn team, a 10-2 Auburn team, a 2-10 Auburn team. They play well against Alabama. That Crimson shows up. They not only get fired up, they play well. Just because you're fired up doesn't mean you'll play well. That's not a thing. I love when people say this is their Super Bowl. I've been watching Super Bowls my whole life. Half the time somebody doesn't play well at all in the Super. Just because the Super Bowl doesn't mean you're going to play well.
Yeah.
Half the time people get to the Super Bowl and they play one of their worst games of the year because the stage got too big, platform's too big. Oh, and by the way, the team you're playing is probably the best team in the NFL. So I don't like that it's their Super Bowl. I don't know what that means. What I do know is this: Auburn gets up for the game every year and they play well. That's just a fact. And Alabama people know this. And so it was a really good win. I think beating Auburn at Auburn isn't too far removed from beating Georgia on a neutral field. And for everybody that just shrieked and said that's impossible, Auburn beat the crap out of Georgia and Jordan Hare for 30 minutes. I mean, Auburn controlled the football game against Georgia in their stadium for the first 30 minutes. There was some questionable officiating in the game. That's not Jimmy's opinion. The SEC fired the whole officials over it. So anyway, I'm just saying that Auburn's not too far removed from the best teams in this league, and it was in their place, and they played really well. So great win. Zay Horton, 3 touchdowns, possession receiver extraordinaire. I want people to think of Zay Horton. When I say in the future, when a wide receiver is labeled a possession receiver, that is not a negative label. I mean, to me, Zay Horton is like possession receiver extraordinaire. He's so good in the red zone. He's so good converting third downs because he makes the contested catch in traffic as good as anybody you'll see. He's got this big body. He's got great hands. That's the possession receiver. And I'll say, yeah, he's a possession receiver. He's a possession receiver 32 NFL teams are going to want. Probably not in round 1 because you don't take a possession receiver in round 1. But you want him on your football team. And Zay Horton, Iron Bowl legend. Ty Simpson making his best throw of the day on the 4th and 2. And I want to hear you talk about this. You can talk about whatever you want, but I want to hear you talk about it because you talked about it this morning in the greatest show that's been ever recorded and nobody gets to hear it. But you talked about this morning. I think it was so good about how the offensive line now appears solidified and that's probably benefited this newfound run game.
Yeah, and first of all, great analysis there. I completely agree. The offensive line is solidified, in my opinion. I think Cam Dewberry played a good football game against Auburn. He did allow one pressure, but I think overall he has been a stabilizing presence. I think his last two games, his last two Power Four games, have been two of his best. I think he's getting settled in. He's not perfect. He's not a perfect schematic fit, but I think they're making it work with him next to Caden Proctor. There's some instability at center right now with Parker Brailsford being hurt, but assuming Parker is healthy, or is at least playing. I mean, if you got to play Geno Vandermark, I thought he played fine against Auburn. Really, both centers struggled in pass protection, but I think that if you got to do that and kind of rotate those players because Parker's unable to play an entire game, hopefully that doesn't end up being the case by the time the SEC championship rolls around. But if that ends up happening, that you do what you have to do. But I think as far as assuming that Parker Brailsford is healthy or that he's able to go fully, I love Caden Proctor at left tackle. I love Cam Dewberry at left guard. I think he has solidified himself as that player. No rotating, stick to it, and then whatever you got to do at center. Wilkin Formby, he's going to lose the leverage battle sometimes. He's 6'7", he's a tall guy. I think he does a pretty good job of really trying to maintain pad level and keeping pretty consistent on that front. But there are going to be some lapses where he gets a little high, and if a stocky, shorter defensive lineman can get underneath him, he can get completely dominated. That is part of it. But I think overall he's playing pretty good football at right guard. And Michael Carroll, despite the fact that he's a true freshman, and you're going to get some freshman mistakes, I think that those two guys kind of maintaining or sticking with those two players. You didn't against Eastern Illinois because Jaden Roberts was a senior. You wanted to give him, a tip of the cap. I completely agree with that decision. Love that guy. He has worked so hard for the University of Alabama. Great locker room player. But I think, with Wilkin and Michael now having seen two starts together at right guard and right tackle, I think that not only benefits you for the rest of 2025, however long that may be, but I think it starts to really solidify things as far as the right side of that offensive line for 2026. So that's really encouraging. I mean, the offensive line, I thought they were better as far as zone blocking than the gap blocking, the man, the more power stuff. But, I thought overall the unit did pretty well moving the football. It was wild, absolutely wild, that Alabama averaged 4.2 yards per carry on the ground, and they averaged 3.5 yards per attempt through the air. That is a mind-blowing stat that you would have never – when you talk about Alabama's quarterback and the fact that Ty Simpson was in the Heisman race just a few short weeks ago, you talk about all the receivers they have in the passing game, you talk about the fact that Alabama's run game has pretty much struggled for a majority of the season. Seeing a situation where Alabama is able to have a higher average on the ground than through the air, that was mind-blowing. But at the same time, I do think that whether you're talking about Oklahoma, Eastern Illinois, or Auburn, Alabama's run game does seem to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think it's directly related to more stability up front, kind of like, okay, this is the line. It took them too many games figured out. Or if y'all want to be, if anybody out there that wants to be critical as to Coach Cap or Ryan Grubb or Kalen, maybe it took too many games to figure it out. But they do seem to have figured it out. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you sort of get the offensive line figured out. Carroll, Formby, Brailsford, Dewberry, Proctor. That's your group, right to left, and that's them. Now all of a sudden the run game works better. Now we said all along they're not going to rush for 200 yards. They're not going to be 1995 Nebraska. There's no one's going to flip a switch and then all of a sudden you're a dominant team on the ground. I don't think it was ever going to be that way, but it needed to be better, and it's finally better. There were signs against Oklahoma, who's as good as it gets on defense in 2025. They're as good. The state of the art of college football defense in 2025 is Oklahoma. Alabama had some success running the ball. I think they did not have a single rush for a loss in the Oklahoma game. And when those are like saying, oh, geez, and gives some sort of sarcastic clap, it's actually a thing. That's pretty good to play the best defense in the country and not have a negative rushing play.
Far and away the most disruptive as far as tackles for loss and sacks. I mean, this is a defense that generates a ton of negative plays, and you avoided any negative plays in the run game. That is a huge deal.
So that's how you knew it's getting better. Eastern Illinois shirts, Eastern Illinois, can't really tell, or can you? Because I'm capable of sarcasm too. I sarcastically asked can they even run the ball against Eastern Illinois? Well, they did, and I knew they would. But hey, 250 something yards, I think. You know, it was over the top good. And now they continue that against particularly the beginning of the Auburn game. They ran out that 17-0 lead. Jam Miller looked as sharp as he's looked really all year. And then unfortunately he got banged up at the end and couldn't finish. But the run game is now here. Why Alabama could run the ball, then all of a sudden couldn't throw it is either some sort of Murphy's Law thing. I just didn't see that coming. I thought a better run game would do nothing but aid Ty Simpson the pass game. For whatever reason, the pass game just hit a wall this weekend. It just wasn't good enough. Got to be better to beat Georgia. Absolutely has to be better to beat Georgia. But overall, I think Alabama's doing enough on offense to feel really good. I wanted to talk about Auburn because I know we're going to talk about Georgia, in the show later in the week. But I think the offense, I'm not going to say that it was great against Auburn. It really wasn't. But they didn't turn over the ball. That's how you won the game. You didn't turn it over. And they did make enough plays to win the game. The 3 touchdown passes to Zay, having some success on the ground, no turnovers. That was enough to win the game, which was all that mattered.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at how they were able to do, I mean, Auburn's run defense was really good going into the game. And, I'll give you massive props because as soon as you brought it up last week, you said, and I've already given you props based off of, the post-game show and everything else, because as soon as you said it, a light kind of struck for me. And I went and looked and I'm like, you know what? I think he's right. And you said that you felt like they were going to run the football against that defense better than a lot of people were anticipating. And as soon as I went and looked and I started thinking about it and the improvement, I went and watched the Oklahoma game again. I watched the Eastern Illinois just to kind of get a complete picture. And I understood that the offensive line, you were able to take away a lot more from the Oklahoma game because it was the correct offensive line for the entirety of the game. It was similar competition. So, that was the data point that I mostly used. But I was like, man, with the way that it was moving in the right direction against Oklahoma, I mean, assuming that wasn't a fluke, I do think it could be pretty successful. Auburn's going to try to do some similar things as far as the aggressiveness in which they're going to call some things. But I did definitely think and agree that they were going to be able to run the football a little bit better than people were anticipating. And that ended up being the case. Did it sustain for 4 quarters? No, I think things got more difficult as things wore on. But overall, they ran the football like they needed to. And they just didn't, and I said this earlier, I'll continue to reiterate it. Ty Simpson put some NFL caliber stuff on tape. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier about him is the college game, first of all, whether you're talking about the hash marks, the fact that they're way wider in college, you can exploit the boundary side of the field a lot more, the short side of the field, or you can exploit the wide side of the field with a lot more spacing. Like if you're Tennessee or something, in the NFL, because the hashes are so much narrower, then it's a lot more difficult to get a wider side of the field where there's some space that you can exploit. You can put numbers to the boundary, get guys out in space, and not have a whole lot of guys to the wide side of the field, and you can really have a lot of success. Whether you're talking about that, whether you're talking about the RPO game, the college offenses right now are on average sitting somewhere in the 22, 23, 20, up to 25% RPO rate as far as how often they run it. The NFL is like 6, 7, 8%. It is such a small portion of what NFL offenses do. What Ty is putting on tape right now, it is telling NFL evaluators it's translatable. Like he's having success in the same ways that NFL quarterbacks need to have success. He's not overly reliant on RPO. He's not overly reliant on the spacing. It's not like you're seeing a gimmicky offense. Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer, it's kind of, in a lot of ways, a lot of NFL-style principles. It's an NFL approach, and they're putting a lot on Ty Simpson. So he's putting a ton on tape where even though he's struggling from a consistency standpoint, he's making some crazy plays. He's still flashing on that front, but also he's doing things that are translatable. That is still going to make him a desirable NFL prospect. And I will say, and we talked about this earlier, the two of the 3 touchdown passes that he had, incredible throws. Great throws. Auburn was aggressive on the first one, cover 0, didn't have anybody back there as far as safety help. They were aggressive in sending pressure based off of how the protection was set. It allowed the off-ball linebacker to come clean. the off-ball linebacker did trip a little bit. That ultimately gave Ty enough time to be able to throw the football, but he drifted backwards, was able to elude the pressure just enough, made a slight step back inside, and then threw a football that was very, very solid. I mean, it was an incredible throw, great catch by Isaiah Horton. And then, of course, the third touchdown pass for the game winner on 4th and 2. Another fantastic throw as far as anticipation and timing and all those things. So Ty had some really good moments. We also got to be able to acknowledge, though, that he's just not playing great football right now, and he's not overall. And he's also, like, the vertical passing game is almost as non-existent, maybe even more so than Alabama's run game has been so far this season.
Yeah, that's what's got to be addressed here best you can. I think Ty's banged up, and if he was, I think Ty's banged up. But if he's not, he is now. I mean, he took a beating on Saturday, and you're in game 12. And I'm not saying Ty's banged up maybe any more than Gunnar Stockton is. I mean, it's game 12. They're all hurt to an extent. They're all playing hurt. I mean, like I think Ryan's a good example. I mean, I don't think Ryan's 100% healthier. He'd be playing more snaps himself. So you're just at that time of the year where so many players are hurt. But no, Ty made the plays to win the game, but Ty's got to be better than this as the competition is about to go up. I mean, Georgia's going to be, no joke. Ty's got to go back and watch the Georgia game from earlier this year to remind himself of that he has had success throwing the ball against this type team and this defense. But no, I think Alabama's offense is in an okay spot considering the injuries. I mean, the injuries, they were able to finish Auburn, but injuries at running back, injuries at tight end, wide receiver banged up, quarterback banged up, center's out. Hey, if you're the panicking type, there's enough there to justify the panic. But everybody's banged up, and my understanding is Georgia's pretty beat up too.
Yeah, I mean, and you are 100% correct. In the way that Georgia is going to attack Alabama, probably, if I had to guess, Kirby typically is pretty vanilla in his game plan and his approach, because he kind of takes the Nick Saban approach where it's our dudes are just better than your dudes. They're more talented. We're going to let them go out there and we're going to let them win. He's not going to take the Brent Venables or the DJ Durkin approach necessarily where it's like ultra aggressive. But if you look at what Lewis did for Oklahoma, he had 2 sacks. He's an off-ball linebacker. They were bringing him a lot as far as the A-gap pressure, allowing him to get after Ty Simpson. And, they were allowing Alabama's motion to kind of create opportunities for him to get those free shots through the A-gap. You're going to see probably some of that from Georgia, because not only did you have that, but you had Xavier Atkins against Auburn in the Iron Bowl where he had 1.5 sacks. So from those 2 off-ball linebackers in the last 2 Power 4 games, 3.5 sacks combined and quite a few pressures. And it was on limited opportunities. But when you talk about C.J. Allen or Raylan Wilson, 2 of the best off-ball linebackers in the country, probably one of the best off-ball linebacker duos in the country, they can both get after the quarterback. Raylan Wilson probably more so than C.J. Allen, but both of them have that capability. And because Georgia, they're starting to figure some things out as far as their pass rush, but they still like to send those guys and allow those guys to make plays in the backfield. I could totally see them taking a page out of Oklahoma's and Auburn's book and using some of that, but they're just not going to be as aggressive, in my opinion, getting after Ty Simpson. And the fact that you have a mulligan, if you're Georgia, you can lose this game. You're still making the college football playoff. And if you had to play Alabama a third time, if you reveal everything, all the adjustments that you planned on making against them from the first game, and Alabama's able to see that and then make adjustments of their own for a potential third matchup, now you're talking about Georgia being at the disadvantage when it comes to having to play a team twice, quote unquote. So, that's going to be an interesting – I know we're talking about Auburn. We'll be talking about this a lot more throughout the week, but that is something for Alabama fans to keep in mind, because Ty Simpson did take a lot of shots. Now, I was pretty surprised. I wasn't, because I've kind of said it all season that they needed to, but they did rely on his legs a little bit more in this football game.
I didn't like to us. They were listening to us.
That's exactly right. They listened to us. But I didn't like how they did at the end of the game, because he took some massive shots, and it was like, I mean, at that point, game's kind of in hand. I would be more timely with it. But they even did some early on. And I just wonder, I mean, I do think that he is kind of banged up. I don't know to what extent. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to speculate, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was a little bit banged up. So maybe that has been what's holding them back a little bit on using his legs. But we've talked a lot on this show about, with some of the struggles you've had in the vertical passing game and struggles you've had in the traditional run game, the fact that you're trying to come up with ways to strain the opposing defense, it just felt like, based off of the way that they talked about Ty Simpson's legs all throughout the offseason and what we know about Ty Simpson's legs, you would have thought they would have been a bigger element of the offense. They haven't been. Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe they're saving it. They did save it a little bit for Auburn. I do think some of those runs probably caught Auburn off guard, but I don't, I still think they could utilize it more, assuming that Ty Simpson's healthy enough to handle a little bit of a larger workload on that front.
Yeah, they, we both wanted Ty's legs to get more involved. I think we saw some of that. Again, some of those shots you felt might have been a little unnecessary because that's what you want to avoid that. But Ty's legs, and I think we showed why we wanted it. I mean, they showed us why me and you wanted to see more of Ty's legs. It works. He is an athletic kid. I like the quarterback sweeps that they ran, more RPO type stuff. Ty made plays with his legs. I'd like to see it continue, with the huge caveat: if he's banged up before, he's more banged up now. I'm not sure how much more he can take. The idea is that the Georgia game won't be the last one you play, so you do have to save what's left of Ty going forward. And I do think some of the decrease in efficiency is due to injuries, not only to Ty, but to other offensive players. And losing Cuevas, I mean, you lost a high volume target guy there, and freshmen just aren't going to adequately replace him, especially as a pass receiver. So more than just Ty's banged up, and that's an issue going forward.
Yeah, the reliability factor, like a lot of his reliable weapons. Jeremy Bernard missed the Eastern Illinois game, and I would assume that he probably wasn't 100% healthy in this one either. He did get 10 targets. That is a very healthy workload, but he only caught 3 for 24 yards. He also averaged or had 1 carry for 4 yards, so 4 total touches, 28 total yards. I mean, this was one of his lower yardage outputs that he's had so far this season. I don't think that's a coincidence. And when you talk about Josh Cuevas being out, being that security blanket, that guy that you can really rely on in those critical moments, the fact that Jeremy Bernard really wasn't probably at his best, didn't play his best game for one reason or another. I personally think it was probably a little bit injury related, but also, even if it wasn't, bottom line is you really couldn't rely on him a ton to be the typical impactful player that we're used to seeing from him. You talk about Ryan Williams getting 0 targets in the football game. You talk about Lottie Brooks. I don't think he had his best performance. So it wasn't really just Ty Simpson. And you start going through those players, and it's like, that's a lot of your top pass catchers in the passing game. Man, that's kind of a big deal. Well, Isaiah Horton, while it wasn't a ton from a yardage standpoint, he made the clutch plays that Alabama needed him to make. And he's had a pretty consistent role throughout the season. And I say consistent. He's been a part of the offensive production for pretty much the entire season, but in a lot of ways, actually, it's been inconsistent. I think that's the product of this offense and the fact that you got a lot of different players. Like Ryan Williams, he is not playing. He is not as bad as some fans are making him out to be. He just hadn't been the superstar player that is going to demand targets over a lot of these other guys. Like if Jeremiah Smith was in Tuscaloosa right now, he's a dude where it's like, I don't care if you got 20 other first-round talents, you're going to figure out a way to get Jeremiah Smith the football because he's just that big of a freak. We were thinking that was going to be Ryan Williams, and I think that fans in a lot of ways are probably being too hard on him. But at the same time, he has been a disappointment relative to those expectations. He just hasn't been as bad as fans like to act like he has been. He's been a guy who's been involved in that conversation, and while he does have the drops from time to time, he's still going to be a player that they rely on. It's just he hasn't performed to an extent where Alabama feels like they have so many playmakers in the passing game. They don't have to force feed Ryan Williams. Other teams, if you had 1 or 2 really good receivers and one of them was Ryan Williams, you would force feed him, but there just is not this huge talent drop off. In 2021, when you had Jamison Williams and you had John Mechie, you went down to Slade Bolden. Slade Bolden was fine. Love me some Slade Cat. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan, but that was a huge drop off from wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 3. So They force fed those top 2 guys a lot, and they were their playmakers. This is more right out-esque, not saying to the extent from a talent standpoint, but from a standpoint of you've got 4 or 5 different players who can all be impactful on each, any given Saturday. And so this idea that maybe Ryan Williams might go a game without a catch or without a target, that's not shocking to me as much as it probably is to other people. But at the same time, I also understand how that could probably be a bad look. But I mean, just right now, the pass catchers without Josh Cuevas, without having 100% healthy Jeremy Bernard, I do think that has affected Ty a little bit.
Oh, it'd have to. I mean, it just simply has to. And again, I think we'll find that when the season's over and there'll be interviews and analysis come out, I think we'll find that Ryan was probably just a little banged up than most people knew. I mean, throughout the year with various minor things, not anything that's going to keep you out. And let me availability report. You know, I saw one person say Ryan's not hurt. He hasn't been on these availability reports. Well, first of all, he has, but at one point. Yeah. But secondly, look what the availability report is. The availability report is about being able to play in the game. That's all that is. It is not a list of all the players on your team who are hurt.
It's not an injury report. It's an availability report.
Jeff Allen gets the list that you guys are talking about. These kids need attention from the training staff because they have these various bumps and bruises. The availability report is about who can play in the game and who might not play in the game. Think about it in this sense, and I know they'll never use this word, but it's really for gamblers more than anything, people who bet on the game. They need to know who's going to play in the game and who potentially may not. But if you're hurt but able to play in the game, you're not going to be on that report. So that's just for everybody to understand who might be a little confused over what's an availability report versus the list that Jeff Allen gets about who needs to be in the training room and who's getting what kind of treatment and who needs treatment for what. So, you know, I think Ryan's been a little banged up than more people know. And then, as Clint said, increased depth, the issues with the drops. And since Cuevas has been hurt, they're playing more 12 personnel. When you play more 12 personnel, what does that mean? One less wide receiver in the game. So to some extent, when Alabama goes 12 personnel, Ryan may be the one that's getting squeezed out more than others. He played 30-something snaps against Auburn. That's still roughly half the game. And it's crazy that you would think Ryan played half the game. But when you add up, not healthy, 12 personnel, Jeremy's great, Lottie's great, Zay Horton's great, some people get squeezed out, and Ryan gets a little squeezed out. But that's all that I think there is to that. And it's not some big conspiracy or all of a sudden Ryan forgot how to play football. I think at some point he might become 100% healthy and he'll remind everyone about why there was so much hype in the first place.
100%. And Jeremy Bernard has been the most reliable receiver. I think there's something to be said for that. I think that, you know, as far as pecking order is concerned, I think Jeremy Bernard has been the number one.
Yep.
So he's the guy that you kind of say, okay, let's feature him. And what I mean by feature is, you know, you take what he does well and you make that the primary focus. And, you know, with Ryan Williams, in a lot of ways, that's why Ryan has been the one playing in the slot. They don't think Ryan Williams is this undiscovered, crazy good slot receiver. They think he can get better there and he can be a productive inside out player, but that is not where he won last year. That's not where you would really expect him to win this year. He's done the best that he possibly could, but a lot of people would say, well, just put Jeremy in there. Jeremy is the top guy, and he does well as far as being that Z receiver, going in motion, getting him on jets, putting him in the backfield. And so Ryan has kind of been that player. You've got Isaiah Horton, who's kind of the X. You've got, you know, Lottie Brooks, who's kind of the pure slot. And then you've got the players like Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams. So you will move around. Bernard is playing some of the slot, and it's a pretty healthy amount, but that's also leaving a pretty high percentage for Ryan Williams inside. Next year, when you don't have Jeremy Bernard, more than likely Ryan becomes that primary outside receiver opposite Isaiah Horton, assuming that Horton comes back. And then Lottie Brooks steps up into a starting role there in the slot, with Rico Scott continuing to be that wide receiver 4, playing inside some, playing outside some. And so I think Ryan will be put in a position to be a little bit more productive next year. And my guess is with him being 100% healthy going into next year, that there will be higher expectations relative to what we saw this year. And there was high expectations going into this year. So I'm not saying relative to last offseason, but I'm saying that I think that you'll get more production out of him kind of going back to the outside and letting him do some of those things. Just saying not to give up on him. Another couple quick things is, one, the tight ends, because Josh Cuevas wasn't available. We had kind of mentioned last week in the preview episode that, you know, you're probably going to see a lot of Caleb Edwards because he had been tight end 2. Not only are you missing Cuevas, but you're also missing Danny Lewis. So we definitely thought that we're going to see quite a bit of Edwards. We also mentioned that we probably could see up to 4 tight ends moving forward. That's exactly what you got. Brody Dalton played 6 of the 75 snaps for 8%. Jay Lindsey being kind of that player who started in place of Josh Cuevas against Eastern Illinois. We thought we were going to see quite a bit of him. He played 14 out of 75 snaps. That's just under 20%. Marshall Pritchett, the true freshman, he played exactly 20%, 15 of the 75 snaps. And Caleb Edwards played a total of 60 of the 75 snaps, which is 80%. So that's quite a bit. I mean, and you talk about that goes to a little bit, 127% of the snaps. So that's probably about a fourth of the snaps on average that you had 12 personnel in this football game, if I had to guess. That's one out of every 4 plays. That's probably about 15 or so, or a little bit higher than that.
I think it's more than you saw earlier this year.
Yeah. And so that's, it's definitely, in my opinion, more than you saw earlier this year, which is what you talked about. But you saw 4 guys who all ended up playing. I don't think from a pass catching standpoint, anybody did anything special at the tight end position. In fact, I think Marshall Pritchett kind of struggled on that front. He ended up having, I got the wrong game pulled up. I don't remember how many targets. I'll get that information, but I mean, he did struggle.
2.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot. I was going to say 3, so 2 makes sense. But he didn't do a whole lot on that front, neither did Caleb Edwards. What I did like about what they did was, the perimeter blocking, especially on the zone stuff. I mean, I thought that one of Auburn's big advantages going into this game, without Danny Lewis, without Josh Cuevas, you were going to rely on 2 true freshmen, a redshirt freshman, and a transfer that hadn't played a ton in Brody Dalton. I was kind of worried a little bit about Keldrick Falk and Kieran Crawford. Both of those 2 guys, as far as the edge setting ability, especially Falk, very good run defender. That's something that I was wanting to keep an eye on. I actually think the tight ends overall did a pretty decent job against those guys.
Oh, they did. They did. I mean, I think considering what's happened to the tight ends post Cuevas, they've done an admirable, fine job. But it's such a drop off because Cuevas was such a weapon. I don't think we have weapons out there right now. I just think we have players, but they're not necessarily weapons. I think Caleb Edwards is going to be a really good player. I think Marshall Pritchett is going to be outstanding, but they're freshmen. And when you look out there and you're seeing, freshman tight ends are going to make mistakes. I thought Michael Carroll had a couple of missed assignments or blocking the wrong guy moments. I thought Dijon Lee, had at least one bad play with Malcolm Simmons. You can't put all these freshmen out there and expect senior results. But overall, I think the freshmen are doing fine. It's just interesting to me philosophically that you couldn't replace Cuevas with one guy. I mean, Caleb Edwards, because Cuevas is such a unique talent, especially as a pass receiver. So their idea of replacing Cuevas is using 2 guys frequently and changing up the look. Caleb Edwards more of a Y, Marshall Pritchett more of an H. Jay Lindsey can do a little of both. Brody Dalton probably a strict Y. But we have the bodies to mix and match there. But the loss of Cuevas has been huge, Clint. Cuevas is an absolute weapon. Now you don't really have a weapon at tight end. You just have players.
Yeah, and running back, we don't know what's going on with Jam. Obviously, he was looking really good. That wasn't overly surprising to me. I know a lot of fans have criticized him, but I still knew that Missouri Vanderbilt Jam Miller was in there somewhere, and that he could be a little bit more productive. And you started to see that, him return to that form. And of course, another injury decides to step right back in the way. It's what he's dealt with all season. You hate it for him, but Daniel Hill probably going to need to be a guy they give volume to moving forward, especially against Georgia this weekend. You don't have Kevin Riley available. You're probably not going to have Jam Miller available. I've talked a lot about the stamina of a Daniel Hill, and that'll be something that I'll be monitoring moving forward. You might have to see some Dre Washington. You might have to see some AK Deer. Maybe you see some Richard Young, but that's kind of, I think we both are in agreement. He's right now, he just seems to be at the bottom of the pecking order. Deer only played 1 snap, but it did result in a 6-yard catch on a screen. So I don't know if you see more of him moving forward, but either way, Daniel Hill, because he's kind of been that constant throughout the entire season, he needs to be ready for a pretty hefty workload against Georgia, and he's certainly capable. I'm excited to see how they use him. Really need to get better in pass protection, though, because out of the 9 pressures that were allowed, 3 of them were given up by the running backs, 2 from Jam Miller, 1 from Daniel Hill. They have not been great in pass pro in recent weeks. 3 of the 9 came from the 2 tackles. Caden Proctor had 2. Michael Carroll had 1, and then the other 3 came from the interior guys with Cam Dewberry, Gino Vandermark, and Parker Brailsford all having 1 apiece. So Wilkin Formby did not give up 1. But that's something to kind of keep an eye on, because a pretty even split between running backs, tackles, and interior guys. They need to get more production and pass pro from the running backs. And without Jam Miller, who was expected to be their best player in that facet, that will be something to watch. Do you have anything else before we hop over to the defensive side and talk about that?
Nope, good. Just watch the injury situation going forward. This, when people say, gosh, the offense just isn't what it was, let's remember the personnel's not what it was. It's a banged up football. It's a banged up football team, and the competition's about to get tougher. Now, thankfully, everyone else is banged up too, because you're that deep into the season. But this is a banged up football team. Every position group on offense, whether you're talking about somebody who's banged up and still playing, or people who are literally out, that's the issue with the offense going forward to me right now, is just general overall health.
Yep, I think that's a great point. All right, that's going to do it for this show. We're going to be back talking about the defense. Appreciate the patience. We had to have a little delay due to going for a little over an hour and a half and not being able to use a single second of it. Still upset about it, going to be upset about it, but everybody was patient. Jimmy was fantastic as far as hopping back on here with me, so I appreciate that. Get on over to rowback.com and use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order, and we will talk to you guys soon.